Well, welcome back. It is Friday. It is March 1st. I'm still Paul Thompson. Are you still Steve Autrey?
Best as I can tell.
We're so glad. We're here. We have entered into Jerusalem with Jesus. We have already made that visit to the temple. Jesus is headed back. And then today we want to spend a few minutes talking with you about Jesus cleansing the temple. Again, one of the more fascinating passages. So, Steve, what was the reality for a Jew in that day when they were made to go to the temple to be a part of this sacrificial system? Their relationship with God was often expressed with something that they valued, their best animal they brought and offered it as a sacrifice. And yet there was a system in place. What was that system like?
It was not kind to those who had less than. So one of the ways that the temple folks paid their bills, there was a temple tax, start there, that was due. But beyond that, when you came to make a sacrifice, you just couldn't show up with any old animal. It had to be meet all kinds of specifications. So, and also, you got to understand, it's Passover, people are traveling quite a distance usually, and to bring a sacrificial animal with them may have been very difficult. So most people opted to purchase an animal to be sacrificed once they got to the temple. Now, one of the problems with that, complicating factors of that, is the currency of the day, the legal tender, was Roman coin. But there was also in circulation Jewish money. You could only use Jewish money in the temple because they felt like to use Roman coinage was be
blasphemous, because
it did have the image of Caesar on it. And maybe you remember something about whose image is on that penny, right? So what would happen is, especially for those for poorer people, they would come in and the exchange rate would be pretty brutal. So you exchange your Roman money for the Jewish money, you would get fleeced there, and then what you could buy with it would then be set by the people in the temple too. So they're making money on the exchange of them. They're making money off the exchange, and then they're making money off of selling these particular animals for sacrifice. And it was pretty lucrative, evidently.
So it was an economic system that was being utilized to take advantage of people. And I think that, probably in a nutshell, is why Jesus goes in angry. I don't think the Bible even tries to hide that displeasure. Jesus is angry. He turns over the tables of the money changers. He drives those out and says, "You have taken this house of prayer and turned it into a den of robbers."
It's interesting, though. There are places where it looks like Jesus is angry. The other places, especially in John's Gospel, remember John does it earlier, where Jesus is much more calculating. He sits down and makes a whip out of cords. So it's more of a sign act, the way a prophet would have a sign of what's to come. So there's that, but there's certain passion there that Jesus has for this holy place. And if you notice, it said he entered the temple, began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. Now, any significance to doves?
Yeah, so what we know, again, from Luke and from others, is the doves were the poor person's tender.
Yeah.
If you couldn't afford a cow or a ram, something like that, then the law prescribed that the poor person could do for the doves.
And people, believe me, people sized each other up when you came in. If you had a couple of doves with you, that meant, look over there at the poor people. If you came in with the unblemished lamb, then you were,
wealthy enough to
right.
afford that.
It's kind of like how we look at each other's cars, right? If you can drive that, you must be somebody. Or if you're driving that, you must be a nobody. So that's going on here. And if you remember, whenever I think it's Matthew's gospel that they take Jesus to the temple to dedicate, they purchase 2 doves. Mm-hmm. So we get 2 turtle doves in the 12 days of Christmas. Yeah. So it is the poor person's thing. So it's Jesus siding with that. But whatever his, and I've also heard this. You tell me, like one person that I've had some conversations with recently talked about, well, I need to get angry because Jesus got angry. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I think anger is an emotion that all of us are going to have, and there is nothing wrong about getting angry. Matter of fact, there are a lot of things we should be angry about. It's always what we do with our emotions. Do we let those emotions drive every part of our behavior? So it's not wrong to be angry. It's what we do with it. Jesus, we would sense, this is righteous anger. He is doing what God wants it to be done. Now, the hard part about this story is probably within 20 minutes of Jesus doing this, they've already set back up and the process is keeping on going on.
Well, and I also think this is Jesus. I think Jesus can handle his emotions better than we can. Mm-hmm. This is not a license to get mad about stuff.
It's not a license to get mad and use that and say, I'm going to allow physical violence because I'm angry. That's not what this is about. Don't even.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things we need to be careful with. That there are people who use this as a way of, well, I'm angry for Jesus' sake. Like, is that if you're really tied into who Jesus is, you'll find that anger's not much a part of your life.
Yeah, it's a natural emotion, but what we do with that is important.
But what matters here so much is after this, he quotes again the Old Testament. You've made my house my house is to be a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. And then he goes on to say, this gets to the chief priest and scribes, and they kept looking for a way to kill him.
What's the reality here is often if you mess with people's economic system, then they will look for a way to kill you.
Well, and one of the dynamics here, yeah, that is absolutely true. You start messing with people's pocketbooks, time gets short. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's happening here that is I've often wondered about, especially when I was younger, was, well, they saw him right there. Why didn't they arrest him then? Well, they did. They had to be very careful because the crowds were very supportive of who Jesus was. And if they had taken him and arrested him at this moment, then there would have been a riot. So they have to find a way to get to Jesus when nobody essentially will know it. So
trying to finish up chapter 11 a little bit today with you. This next parable, this next part about the withered fig tree, Jesus sees this, the disciples see the fig tree, which is a parable of Israel, a parable of this whole wrong system in which they're participating in. It is an indictment on what they have done to what God intended. And so Jesus then makes the point about, through prayer, amazing things can happen. And then he comes again to Jerusalem, and this is where his authority is questioned. And this is a fascinating. Tell me quickly the word authority. What do we do with that here?
Well, it's something that's been interesting from the very beginning, that people recognize that Jesus taught with authority, not as one of the scribes or the Pharisees. Mm-hmm. That it's something that come and is derived from within him. But again, they're so used to looking to systems for who had authority. Like, you're not the chief priest, you're not the whatever, so where do you get that from?
So they want to test Jesus, and they want to ask him about this John the Baptist. They want to test Jesus on where does he get this authority from. He turns the tables, as Steve said earlier. You ask Jesus a question, oftentimes he's going to come back with a question, and they won't answer this question about John the Baptist because they know that Jesus has got them between a rock and a hard place. If they give this answer, it's going to hurt these group of people. If they say a different response, it'll be another group. So Jesus refuses to play their game.
Well, and they're playing their question, and the way they answer, it's all due to a political calculus. It's not about trying to get to the truth of anything.
Right.
And I think that's one of those things that the truth does carry its own authority. And so much about what we hear today is calculated speech to try to sway or convince or at least
manipulate.
Not manipulate or not offend. And that is that's not authority. And so truth really does matter. And that that's where we're. There's a great line in one of Jason Isbell's songs that says, "If you tell the truth enough, you'll find it rhymes with everything." And so it's all rooted in the truth. So we're up against our time, but we got to go. So we'll get to chapter 12 next week as we get a little closer to Easter.
We're marching on toward Jerusalem and Easter, and thank you folks so much for your time.
Thank you.